I'm just an honest guy, not handsome, not a top student, and definitely not some rich heir. And yet, someone as plain and unremarkable as me ended up in a sweet online relationship with the school beauty, Willow. But just as I was about to tell Willow who I really was, and officially confess my feelings to her, her Louis Vuitton card holder went missing that very afternoon. Her best friends posted a lost and found notice. It read, "If a beautiful girl finds it, there's a reward of 2,000 yuan. If a handsome guy finds it, he can date Willow." And, by pure coincidence, the person who found the card holder was me. But when I looked inside, I discovered something that left me stunned. Tucked inside the card holder was a photo of Makoto, the famous tall, rich, and handsome guy from our class. Chapter 01. Only then did I finally realize it. The person Willow liked was Makoto. I froze for a moment, completely at a loss. Just 2 minutes ago, I had been daydreaming that my 3-year crush might finally come true, and now, it was all over. Right then, Makoto walked into the classroom looking anxious. He gritted his teeth and snapped at the guys beside him. "Damn it, it's been missing all morning and we still haven't found it. What do we do? What if some other guy finds it and gives it back to Willow? Then I'm screwed." One of his friends tried to comfort him. "Relax, you're overthinking it. So many guys have chased her, and she's never said yes to any of them. This is probably just a joke her friends came up with." Willow was beautiful. She was also one of the top students in school. Ever since I met her, she had never lacked admirers. Makoto was one of them, and Willow had always been indifferent to him. But strangely enough, about half a month ago, she suddenly stopped being so cold toward him. Some people had even started guessing that Willow, the untouchable dream girl everyone admired from afar, would eventually end up with Makoto. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Makoto let out a sigh. His brows were tightly furrowed as he ran a frustrated hand through his hair. My pen paused. Then something suddenly clicked. This morning, I had actually found the wallet right next to Makoto's desk. Oh, so that was it. Willow had done it on purpose. She had deliberately left it near Makoto's seat and then had her friends post that announcement online. The whole thing was just an excuse to get together with him. Who could have guessed that I'd accidentally ruined her plan? Chapter 02. I couldn't focus on class for the rest of the day. When school finally ended, it felt like I'd been granted a pardon. I hurried out of the gates and headed home. The moment I got back, I pulled out my phone and looked at the pinned contact at the top of my WeChat. Willow. 2 minutes earlier, she had sent me a voice message. Still refusing to tell me your name? Whatever. I found you anyway. 3 years ago, we had added each other on a forum by pure chance. Back then, though, I didn't know who she was. I'd been scammed online before, so I never shared my real information with people on the internet. Naturally, I had never told her my name. The only thing I mentioned was that my family was originally from S City and that I was currently studying in a city. She, on the other hand, had been surprisingly straightforward. What a coincidence. I'm in a city too. My name's Willow. Judging by the way you talk, we're probably around the same age. I hadn't thought much of it until my first year of high school began. I actually heard the name Willow. She was far more dazzling than I had ever imagined. In real life, I was quiet and reserved. I barely had any friends. After discovering who she really was, I became even less willing to tell her the truth. So when she said she'd found me, she was probably just bluffing to get a reaction out of me. Besides, she already had someone she liked. To her, I was nothing more than an online friend. Letting out a sigh, I replied, "Sorry, I won't be using this account anymore. Let's just pretend we never met." After sending the message, I logged out of WeChat. Then I spent the entire night staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. What else could I do? Half asleep and half awake, drifting in and out of consciousness, I found myself thinking, if only I were a girl, then even if I lost my chance at love, at least I could have claimed the $2,000 reward and treated myself to a really good meal. Chapter 03. The next day, I decided to put the wallet back where it belonged. That way, it would be returned to its rightful owner. Some things simply weren't meant to be yours, no matter how hard you tried. Forcing it would change nothing. But before I had the chance to return it, I only stepped to the back of the classroom to get some water when Makoto suddenly rushed over. Holding up the wallet, he asked, "Bro, seriously, I've been looking everywhere for this, and it was with you the whole time. If I hadn't walked past your desk while cleaning, I never would have found it." He smirked. "Hey, George, don't tell me you like Willow too." He wasn't exactly subtle when he charged over. The moment he asked that question, the attention of the entire class shifted toward me. Since starting school here, aside from being called on to answer questions in class, I'd never had so many people looking at me at once. My heart immediately started racing. I did like Willow, but I was a coward. I didn't dare admit it. Just as I was about to deny it, I saw Willow standing at the classroom doorway. She looked at me with obvious disdain, yet the moment her gaze landed on Makoto, A trace of gentleness appeared in her eyes. I'd never truly understood what it meant to feel utterly crushed inside. Now I finally did. Then I heard my own voice. My throat felt dry as I said, I just happened to find this by accident. What does that have to do with some girl named Willow? Besides, I'm not interested in her. In a single sentence, I told several lies. At that moment, all I could think was how lucky I was that we'd never talked on the phone back when we were online friends. Otherwise, she probably would have recognized my voice and realized I was the person she'd been chatting with online. As soon as I finished speaking, a few classmates laughed. One of them said, "Exactly, George is such a bookworm. He never pays attention to anything outside of studying. He probably doesn't even know who Willow is, let alone know about that post." That's true. Must have just been a misunderstanding. "Willow, why are you here so early today?" Makoto froze for a second before turning around and spotting her. "Willow, you're here." Willow walked over and replied in her clear, pleasant voice. "Yeah." Makoto quickly pulled a paper bag from his backpack and handed it to her. "You haven't had breakfast yet, right? I brought you some soup dumplings." Only after Willow accepted it did he finally relax. Then, half-jokingly, he said, "Look at that. George was the one who found your wallet. So are you going to keep your promise and become his girlfriend?" Chapter 04. At that, Willow smiled faintly. Then she let out a soft snort and said, "The wallet fell right under your desk. Are you seriously that clueless? How did someone else end up finding it?" The moment those words left her mouth, everyone understood what was really going on. The classmates immediately began teasing them. Whoa. So losing the wallet was intentional. Even a blockhead like Makoto should get the hint now. Someone else laughed and added, "Well, now it's awkward. Someone else found it. How are you supposed to wrap this up? You can't seriously make him your boyfriend, can you?" At that moment, I stood there frozen. For the first time, I felt like a truly despicable person. Just as embarrassment was about to swallow me whole, Willow walked over. She said, "Classmate, that's my wallet. Thank you for finding it. I'll honor the promise and give you $2,000. Could you return it to me?" I forced an awkward smile. "Sure." My voice was barely audible. Right then, the class bell rang. I didn't say another word and hurried back to my seat. Who would have thought? The first conversation I'd ever have with the girl I'd secretly loved for years would happen under circumstances this humiliating. They looked like the perfect couple, a match made in heaven, and I looked like a clown. I asked myself, "George, is your love really this pathetic? Do you still want to keep going?" Chapter 05. Willow and Makoto started dating in the most public way possible, and I received the $2,000, though it wasn't Willow who gave it to me personally. She had a best friend named Anna. Despite being Willow's best friend, the two of them couldn't have been more different. Willow was cold and distant. Anna was lively and straightforward. That morning, right after class ended, while most of the students were still in the classroom, Anna walked in through the front door and headed straight toward my desk. She tapped on it and said impatiently, "Hey, give me your WeChat." I froze. She rolled her eyes. "George, right, that's your name." I looked up. Our eyes met. For a brief moment, her gaze lingered. Then she simply pressed her lips together and said, "Your WeChat. Give it to me. Willow asked me to transfer the money to you." Hearing that, I quickly scribbled my ID number on a piece of paper. "This one." She took the paper. Then, for some reason, she gave me another long look before turning around and leaving. The second she stepped out of the classroom, everyone started talking. Damn, I thought they were just joking about it. They actually paid him. Another classmate poked me. "You lucky bastard. You hit the jackpot. Good fortune should be shared. You're buying everyone food after school." But someone else chimed in. "Still, compared to $2,000, Makoto's the real winner. He got the school beauty as his girlfriend. Come to think of it, George, you should really thank Makoto. If it weren't for him, how would have you gotten such a sweet deal?" I'd always been quiet in class. This was the first time I'd ever been the center of attention. Feeling awkward, I didn't know what to say. I could only force a smile. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed Makoto yawning. Hearing the teasing, he laughed. All right, cut it out." As he spoke, he lifted his wrist to check the time before getting up and heading out. He was wearing a black digital watch with a silver face. The design was fairly distinctive. Coincidentally, I owned the exact same one. It was part of a matching couple's watch set I'd bought for Willow. Unfortunately, I'd never even had the chance to wear mine. Chapter 06. That evening, when I got home and checked my phone, I saw a friend request from Anna. Ever since I found out that Willow attended the same school as me, I'd created a separate WeChat account to add people from no one high school. After all, if she somehow learned through mutual friends that the person she'd been chatting with online was me, George, the completely ordinary and forgettable guy at school, that would have been unbearably awkward. But after all this time, I realized I'd been worrying for nothing. My social circle was simply too small. I never had any chance to cross paths with her, and Anna was the first person on my contact list who had any connection to Willow. I accepted the friend request. The next second, a transfer notification popped up. I counted the zeros. Not a cent missing. $2,000. My finger hovered over the screen for a long time. Then I tapped accept. Thank you. After sending the message, I went to take a shower. When I checked my phone again afterward, there was still no reply. I was about to put it away when a new message suddenly appeared. Anna wrote, "Sorry about earlier. I didn't mean to sound so rude today. It's all Willow's fault. She didn't want to come find you herself. And I was in the middle of a nap when she dragged me out of bed. I was a little grumpy from being woken up." Reading that, I pictured Anna's puffed up, annoyed face and couldn't help finding it amusing. I typed back, "It's okay." Chapter 07. After that night, Anna and I started running into each other several times a day, while waiting in line at the supermarket, standing one behind the other, during breaks between classes, passing each other in the hallways, but we rarely talked, until one day, when we bumped into each other face to face. The water in her bottle accidentally spilled onto my school uniform. She let out a startled cry and immediately pulled out some tissues to help wipe it off. While apologizing, she smiled and said, "What a coincidence, George. Looks like we're pretty fated, huh?" After that day, we gradually started talking more and more. Her grades were actually excellent. Once we got familiar with each other, we often discussed schoolwork together. Sometimes she asked me questions, sometimes I asked her, except for one particular time. After I'd finished explaining a problem to her, she suddenly called me. Then she said, "Willow's next to me right now. There's a question she can't solve either. Could you explain it to her?" The moment I heard that name, I froze. My throat suddenly felt dry. I said, "What?" But before I could finish, another voice came through the phone, clear and pleasant. Willow said, "Look at this problem. I don't understand why." The question wasn't particularly difficult. I finished explaining it within a few minutes. Afterward, I paused and asked, "Did that explanation make sense?" In her cool voice, she replied, "Yeah." Then she added, "Thank you, you're welcome." After that, neither of them said anything. They'd probably put the phone down already. I was about to hang up when I heard Anna's voice again. "Do you still remember him, the guy who found your wallet?" Willow softly replied, "I remember." "When did you two get so close?" Anna laughed. "That's a secret." Willow was silent for a moment before saying, "The desk in that photo he sent of the problem looks really familiar. It looks like the one at Makoto's house." Chapter 08. The moment I heard that, my heart skipped a beat. I immediately hung up the call. I'd taken photos of that desk for Willow before, and just now, she'd said Makoto had an identical one. I thought about it for a while. My mind was a mess. Suddenly, I remembered the night I completely abandoned that WeChat account. Back then, she'd told me she'd found me. Could it be that she'd mistaken Makoto for the online friend she'd been chatting with? Even worse, was that the reason she'd started dating him? The possibility kept running through my head. That night, I barely slept. Part of me wanted to add Willow back using that old account, to ask her directly, to clear everything up, but just when I'd finally made up my mind, I saw something on my way home from school. Makoto had one hand on the back of Willow's head, and he was kissing her. There was hardly anyone around. The street was quiet. I heard Makoto ask with a smile, "My family wants me to study abroad. Will you come with me?" A breeze swept through the trees, making the leaves rustle softly. Willow pressed her lips together before replying, "Wherever you go, I'll follow." I nodded to myself. There was no need to ask any more. Even if she had mistaken him for someone else, so what? If I told her that I was the online friend she'd been chatting with, would she suddenly fall for me? Probably not. She'd only be disappointed. Disappointed that the person she'd spent all that time talking to wasn't Makoto, but me, an ordinary nobody. Chapter 09. I decided it was time to slowly let Willow go. I threw away the watch. For someone my age, the word love felt both incredibly light and unbearably heavy, but no matter what, my future mattered more. I poured all my energy into studying. Anna was the first person to notice. She messaged me, "I hardly ever see you leave the classroom these days." Naturally, that also meant I rarely saw her or Willow anymore. I replied, "Senior year is almost here. I want to focus on studying and give it one last all-out effort." A long time passed before she responded. Okay. After that conversation, I assumed she wouldn't contact me again, but the very next day, after evening study hall, Willow came to my desk. She handed me a stack of reference books and notebooks. "Anna asked me to give these to you." I froze, then instinctively asked, "Where is she?" Willow stared at me for a moment before replying, "Last night we went jogging together, and she twisted her ankle. She's in the hospital right now." My heart jumped. I immediately stood up. "How is she?" "She's fine," Willow answered calmly. She'll be back in a couple of days. But when I asked which hospital she was in, Willow refused to tell me. Left with no choice, I secretly took out my phone and messaged Anna. It took a long time before she finally replied. Don't worry, it's just a minor injury. I'm not that delicate. Oh, right. Did you get the study materials I asked Willow to give you? There are 2 notebooks from a senior student in there. She was last year's top scorer on the college entrance exam. It took me forever to get those notes, and now they're yours, I replied. I got them. Thank you. When you're discharged, how about I treat you to a meal? She sent back an adorable cat sticker. I put my phone away and looked at the materials in my hands. Opening the top notebook, I saw Anna's name written neatly on the first page. My gaze lingered there for a moment. Her handwriting was just like her, elegant, graceful, and somehow full of life. I flipped through several pages, and honestly, the materials were incredibly useful. I'd always ranked somewhere between 20th and 30th in the grade, but during the final exams not long afterward, I actually broke into the top 10. Anna sent me a message. Congratulations. After she was discharged, I brought up the idea of treating her to dinner twice. Both times, she claimed she was too busy. Eventually, I understood. She simply didn't want me spending money on her. Aside from that, we hardly interacted anymore. Then I spent the entire summer vacation, absorbing everything those notes had to teach me. Chapter 10. Senior year flew by. I barely left the classroom anymore. Nor did I have any interest in keeping up with Willow and Makoto. But they were such a perfect couple that, one way or another, news about them always reached my ears. I heard that on Makoto's birthday, Willow had secretly planned everything herself. She invited a bunch of classmates behind his back, baked the cake with her own hands, and even blew up every balloon at the party herself. No one could deny how much effort she'd put into it. One day, I overheard some classmates talking. But why did Willow write "to Cloudhaven" on the birthday card? No idea. I've never heard Makoto called that. Maybe it's just a nickname only Willow uses for him. Sitting nearby, I felt a ripple disturb the calm I'd spent so long building. Cloudhaven was the screen name I'd used when chatting with Willow. Verdant peaks embraced the sacred land, while crystal vistas shimmered within Cloudhaven. That was where the name came from. For as long as I'd known her, she'd always called me Cloudhaven. And now, did she call Makoto that in private too? Meanwhile, Makoto clearly knew he'd taken someone else's identity, yet he'd kept pretending all this time. Still, none of that had anything to do with me anymore. During the final 2 months before the college entrance exams, I hardly saw Willow or Makoto at all. They were busy preparing to study abroad. I'd heard that back in freshman year, Anna had talked about wanting to go overseas too, but after several years, she seemed to have changed her mind. Instead of following her best friend abroad, she chose to stay and prepare seriously for the college entrance exams. Everything moved forward steadily. By the time of the final mock exam, I'd climbed all the way to 3rd place in the entire grade. That day, Willow happened to return to school to pick something up. I was standing beneath the ranking board when she walked over and stopped beside me. She glanced at the rankings. "Where are you planning to apply?" Her voice was soft. I hadn't expected her to speak to me. We hadn't talked in a very long time, and I hadn't logged into the account named Cloudhaven for over a year. After thinking for a moment, I replied, "B University." Willow smiled slightly. "That's a good choice. I was originally planning to go to C University. It's only 1 street away from B University. But now, she was going abroad with Makoto. They had bright futures ahead of them, a beautiful life waiting for them. I smiled faintly and said nothing. Then she turned and walked away. After she left, I stood there for a long time. Maybe it was because all those memories of secretly loving her came flooding back. Suddenly, I wanted to say a proper goodbye. She probably wouldn't return for graduation photos. This might very well be the last time I'd ever see her. So I chased after her, but before I could call her name, I heard her talking on the phone. She said, "I asked him for you. He said he wants to go to B University. You two used to be pretty close, didn't you? Why didn't you just ask him yourself?" The person on the other end said something I couldn't hear. Willow let out a soft huff. "Makoto's waiting for me outside the school. I've got to go." I stood there, clenching and unclenching my fist. In the end, I didn't follow her to Willow. Makoto was Cloudhaven, and as for that screen name, I would probably never use it again. Chapter 11. But what I didn't expect was that only a couple of days later, I saw Willow again. Someone in the classroom was gossiping. "I heard she's not going abroad anymore. She's coming back to take the college entrance exam." Another girl sounded surprised. "Why? Did she and Makoto break up?" The first person replied, "Looks like it. I have a friend who's friends with Makoto. Apparently, he pretended to be Willow's online friend. That's how he got her to date him. But lies don't stay hidden forever. After keeping it secret for so long, he was eventually exposed. So the two of them ended things on bad terms." I listened quietly, I couldn't quite describe how I felt. That evening, it happened to be my turn for classroom duty. By the time I finished cleaning up, almost everyone had already left the school building. That's when I saw Willow in the hallway. She was leaning against the wall. The moment she noticed me, she pressed her lips together, as if remembering something. She suddenly called my name. George. I looked at her. There was hesitation in her eyes. Her fingers curled slightly around the phone she was holding, but she still spoke, tilting her head. She smiled faintly and asked, "Was your name inspired by a poem?" I froze for a moment, then nodded. "Yeah." She walked toward me. Her eyes stayed fixed on mine. Then she asked, "Do you know anyone whose screen name is Cloudhaven?" My fingers tightened unconsciously. Looking into her searching gaze, I hesitated. For a moment, I considered telling her the truth. Then her phone screen lit up. A name appeared on it. Makoto. So I shook my head. I don't. Much later, I learned what had happened. After Makoto and Willow started dating, he'd always avoided talking about the days they'd spent chatting online. He claimed he'd lost the account. He said he'd been in a dark place back then and never wanted to talk about that period of his life again. But one day, one of his friends accidentally exposed him. The friend pointed at the watch on Makoto's wrist and blurted out, "You're still wearing that thing?" Then he laughed and turned to Willow. "Willow, you have no idea how much trouble he went through to get it. He never used to wear cheap watches like that. No clue what got into him, but he insisted I help him buy that exact model, and he's worn it every day since." Only then did Willow realize everything had been wrong from the very beginning. Through all those countless conversations online, she'd gradually figured out that Cloudhaven probably attended the same school as her, maybe even the same grade. So after returning to school, she started asking around, trying to find anyone who knew that screen name. But after asking countless people, she still found nothing, because by then, Cloudhaven had already disappeared. Chapter 12. On the day we took our graduation photos, Anna came looking for me. "Want to take a picture together?" After thinking for a moment, I agreed. Even though we hadn't talked much during our final year of high school, she'd still remembered which university I planned to attend. She probably really did consider me a friend. Willow was standing nearby, quietly watching the whole thing. After the photo was taken, Anna looked at it for a long moment before turning to Willow. "Aren't you taking one? How about the three of us take a picture together?" Willow lifted her eyes and looked at me for several seconds. Then she finally shook her head. "No." Not long afterward, the college entrance exams arrived. I did very well. My score was more than enough to get into B University. Willow got into C University as she'd hoped. Anna and I ended up attending the same university, but our academic buildings were far apart. We rarely saw each other. Willow, however, came to visit Anna often. One day, I happened to run into them. It was the first time we'd seen each other since graduation photo day. The moment Willow saw me, she froze. Then she instinctively said, "It's you." Strangely enough, during those past few months, I'd hardly thought about her anymore. And now, seeing her again, my heart remained completely calm. Neither of them caused even the slightest ripple. They asked whether I wanted to join them for a meal. Remembering that I still owed Anna dinner from high school, I agreed. While we were walking, Anna asked Willow, "Still haven't found him?" Willow nodded. She didn't bother avoiding the topic in front of me. By then, her search for someone had already become common knowledge among our graduating class. In a disappointed voice, she said, "He must have seen it, but he never came looking for me. Sometimes I wonder if a person like that ever really existed." Anna sighed. "If you can't find him, just let it go. Makoto's still overseas, but he's always thinking about you. He flies back to see you whenever he gets the chance. Is there really no chance for you two anymore?" Willow looked up. Clearly, she didn't want to talk about it. Pressing her lips together, she quietly replied, "Yeah." Chapter 13. After dinner, I went to pay the bill, only for the cashier to tell me that Willow had already paid for everything. I sighed. At this rate, I had no idea when I'd ever get the chance to repay the meal I owed Anna. After that, I started running into Anna more and more often, and she began making her feelings obvious. It wasn't that I didn't understand what she meant, but sometimes, whenever I thought about her connection to Willow, or remembered those dim, hopeless years of my life, I still couldn't bring myself to accept her. On New Year's Day that year, Anna half-jokingly confessed to me. She asked whether I thought she'd make a good girlfriend. I turned her down as gently as I could. That very night, Willow came to see me. She said, "Anna is a really good girl. You probably don't know this, but she chose this university because of you." I looked up in surprise. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. After thinking for a while, Willow suddenly asked, "Are you worried about something?" For a split second, I almost thought she'd figured out that I was Cloudhaven. I forced myself to stay calm, then shook my head. "No." Willow pursed her lips. It seemed like she'd only asked casually, So she didn't press the matter any further. After that day, Anna gradually disappeared from my life, even though we attended the same university. There were tens of thousands of students on campus, without making a deliberate effort to stay in touch. It was surprisingly easy never to see someone again. The next time I saw Willow was 6 months later, during summer break. By then, a trustworthy roommate and I had started a small studio together. I was meeting potential investors one evening when I happened to run into her. A long corridor separated us. She stood among a crowd of people, surrounded by admirers. Just like before, no matter where she went, she was always the center of attention. I'd had quite a bit to drink that night. My head felt heavy, so when I suddenly saw Willow, my brain took a moment to process it. Then she pushed through the crowd and walked straight toward me. Surprised, she called my name, George. Seeing me sway slightly, she grabbed my arm to steady me. Then she raised a hand and touched my forehead. "Ah, why are you so hot? You have a fever." Only then did I realize something was wrong. I was feeling far worse than I should have been, but my mind was already sluggish. I answered absent-mindedly. "Maybe. I'll just call a cab and go home. I'll be fine after some rest." Willow stared at me. "No, I'm taking you to the hospital." Before I could even agree, she grabbed my arm and dragged me toward her car. Chapter 14. Willow helped me register at the hospital and stayed with me through several hours of treatment. Somewhere between sleep and consciousness, I heard her say, "I still have somewhere I need to be. I might have to leave soon." I murmured a couple of acknowledgements. Then she asked, "What's your phone password? I'll call your roommate for you." I casually rattled off a few numbers. Then I drifted back to sleep. When I woke up again, Willow was still there. She stood by the window. Her silhouette looked strangely lonely. Hearing movement, she turned toward me. Her voice caught slightly as she asked, "Why?" I didn't understand. "What?" She shook her head and let out a self-mocking laugh. "It's strange. The moment I unlocked your phone, I instinctively opened WeChat to see if you had another account. You were right beside me all along. So why did you just stand there and watch me mistake someone else for you?" The hospital room was silent. So silent that I could hear my own breathing. After a long pause, I finally said, "I thought about telling you, but back then, Makoto was by your side, and after he was gone, I didn't think it mattered anymore." Hearing that, Willow walked over. Her eyes were red. "Then you." I looked at her calmly, openly. "It's all in the past now, isn't it? So why keep dwelling on it?" Not long afterward, my roommate arrived. Standing outside the door, he hesitated. "George." I nodded. Only then did he step inside. The moment he saw Willow, his eyes nearly popped out of his head. Holy crap. When I got the call, I was completely confused. "When did you secretly get yourself a girlfriend? And such a gorgeous one at that?" I immediately denied it. "She's not my girlfriend." He raised an eyebrow. "Oh, then what is she?" After a brief silence, I answered, "Just a high school classmate." When the words left my mouth, I looked up again. At some point, Willow had already left the room. Chapter 15. That same night, I received a friend request from Willow. She had just gone through my phone earlier that day. For someone like her, memorizing a WeChat ID wasn't difficult at all. I accepted the request, then got straight to the point. "How much were the medical bills?" "I'll transfer the money to you." A long time passed before she replied. "Does it really have to be like this? If you count everything, we've known each other for years." Looking at those words on the screen, I couldn't help feeling emotional. Yeah, 4 years. I'd watched her fall deeply in love with someone else. Back then, she had almost gone abroad with him. After thinking for a moment, I transferred her some money. Then I sent, "This should cover it. Just accept it." After that, I exited our chat. I sat in my chair for a long time. So long that the dorm lights eventually went out. Only then did I pick up my phone again and switch to a different WeChat account. I hadn't logged into that account for far too long. Now, seeing the old username and profile picture again, I felt strangely disoriented. I opened Willow's profile. It was still the same one. She had never changed it. Apparently, she'd been sending messages to me almost every day. Unfortunately, I could only see the recent ones. The older messages were gone forever. "Good morning. I ran into a high school classmate today. She asked if I'd found you yet." I said no. I was so foolish back then. "Which is why I mistook someone else for you." "But you knew I'd gotten the wrong person all along, didn't you?" The next message read, "How have you been lately?" I read them one by one. Then I permanently deleted the account. Sometimes, I still wonder, if she hadn't mistaken someone else for me back then, what kind of ending would we have today? But unfortunately, there are no what-ifs in life. Chapter 16. In truth, Willow was busy too. She was busy with her studies, busy preparing for graduate school entrance exams. But ever since she learned that I was Cloudhaven, she came to see me almost every day. The distance between her university and B university wasn't exactly short, yet she still came. Every single day. One day, my roommate pointed at Willow standing downstairs and said, "She's that gorgeous, and you still have the heart to ignore her. Is your heart made of stone? I already did some digging for you. She's the school beauty at C University." The moment I logged into C University's forum, half the posts were about her. She's basically everyone's dream girl. I laughed. She's never lacked handsome guys chasing after her. That had been true since high school, and it was still true now. I kept avoiding Willow, until one day, a younger student stopped me on campus and handed me a love letter. She said, "I heard you know the school beauty from C University. You're not dating her, right? Good." Then she took a deep breath. "I've had a crush on you for a long time. I was afraid that if I didn't tell you now, I'd never get another chance. Good luck with your studies, senior." The moment she finished speaking, she hurried away. I stood there holding the letter in a daze. Just as I was about to put it in my pocket, someone snatched it from my hand. I looked up. It was Willow. Her eyes were dark with emotion. She asked indignantly, "Was she confessing to you just now? Did you say yes?" I froze. Before I could answer, Willow continued, her voice trembling with frustration. "What exactly did I do wrong? Is this really beyond fixing? Back then, I could tell you liked me too, couldn't I?" I nodded calmly. "Yes, when I found your lost wallet, I even wondered whether that meant I finally had a chance to be with you. But that wasn't what happened." Willow's voice rose. "I mistook Makoto for you, because he pretended to be you. After you disappeared, I had no way of finding you. So I found him and asked whether he was Cloudhaven, and he admitted it. Why won't you give me a chance to make things right?" Our eyes met, but I shook my head. "I already gave you plenty of chances." She was wrong. The truth was, I never really cared that she'd mistaken me for Makoto. Misunderstandings like that weren't difficult to clear up. After spending so much time together, after all those obvious inconsistencies, after all those moments when she had doubts, she still chose to convince herself. She chose to accept Makoto without digging any deeper into who he really was. At the end of the day, who Cloudhaven actually was had never been the most important thing. She simply wanted Cloudhaven to be the person she wished him to be. So even if I'd admitted from the beginning that I was Cloudhaven, what would have changed? She probably would have been disappointed that I wasn't Makoto. And just 2 hours earlier, I'd received a call from Anna. She told me, "I'm at the airport. I'm leaving for an overseas exchange program." After a brief silence, I replied, "I wish you a bright future." She sighed softly. "I heard about everything. All these years, after Makoto, she never dated anyone else. You're the person she's been searching for all this time, aren't you?" I answered quietly. "Yeah, it's me." She laughed softly. "So that's why you rejected me." I thought about it, then replied, "You could say that." The airport around her was noisy. I listened in silence. Neither of us spoke, until a long time later. Finally, I heard her voice again. "If I come back in a year, and you're still not with her, and you still haven't fallen for anyone else, would you like to give me a chance?" Her voice was gentle, completely different from the bold, fiery girl I'd first met, and at that moment, I realized something. Maybe I should give myself another chance, too. I couldn't keep living my life afraid to move forward, always hesitating, always looking back. So I smiled and answered, "Sure." Chapter 17. After that, Willow came to see me 2 more times. The second time, she accidentally left her handbag at my studio. I called her, but she didn't answer, so I brought it over myself. When I arrived downstairs at her apartment building, I saw Makoto standing there with a suitcase. He looked utterly devastated, staring at Willow, his voice hoarse. He said, "I know you're angry at me, but I only did it because I loved you too much. Do you think pretending to be someone else was easy for me? Sometimes I'd lie awake wondering whether you'd hate me if you ever found out the truth. I'm only back for a few days this time. Will you spend some time with me? After this, I promise I'll never bother you again." Then I noticed Willow's fingers twitch slightly. Instinctively, she seemed ready to nod, but the next second, as if suddenly remembering something, she slowly shook her head. She let out a quiet sigh and gently pulled her hand away. "I've already found him." The moment those words fell, Makoto's eyes widened. Grinding his teeth, he demanded, "Is he better than me? Is he richer than me?" Willow was about to answer. Then she saw me. I simply nodded at her, set the handbag down nearby, and turned away without looking back. After getting into a taxi, I noticed several missed calls from Willow. I called her back. Her voice trembled. "I'll explain everything to him." I thought about it for a moment, then smiled. None of that really matters, honestly. What happened back then was just a small episode in our lives. On the other end of the line, Willow was silent for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice sounded strained. "But the fact that you were the one who found my wallet, that was fate, wasn't it?" I rolled down the taxi window and watched the city lights drift by. Then I smiled, but it was never something that belonged to me. You see, even now, you still can't help softening whenever it comes to Makoto. Chapter 18. That winter, my studio landed a major contract. A very, very profitable one. How should I put it? It felt like all the insecurity and bitterness I'd carried since my youth finally disappeared. Fireworks exploded across the night sky. I took a picture and sent it to Anna. Beautiful, isn't it? Want to watch them together next year? She replied almost instantly. Attached was a photo with nearly the exact same background as mine. Then she wrote, "This year works too. Hurry downstairs."